the beginning. My paranormal experiences started when I was roughly 6 years old. My first experience was very unexpected since at this point in life, I didn't really know about the paranormal or spirits. Um, One evening, I was watching TV by myself in the living room while my parents were napping. As I was watching, I suddenly felt a chill on the back of my neck, followed by what felt like someone pushing a firm single finger straight down into the top of my shoulder. As that happened simultaneously, I heard someone whisper hello behind my right ear. Uh, at that, I sprinted into my parents' room, telling them I heard someone whisper in my ear and that someone was in the house. They brushed me off and didn't check for me. To this day, I wonder if this event somehow opened me up to the years of events that followed that narration closet encounter. After this incident, unexplainable things started to happen in my house. My stepdad liked to scare me from time to time, and he would hide in my closet before bed and poke at my feet to scare me. One night before bed, I checked my closet and closed it, knowing nobody was in there. Not long after I laid down, I could hear the door to my closet sliding opening. When I looked at the dark crack in the closet, I saw red eyes staring back at me. I ran, flicked the lights on, and opened the door thinking my stepdad was in there trying to scare me again, but nobody was in there and those eyes were gone too. The eyes in the bathroom vent. Another experience I would have frequently involved the bathroom. When I took a bath, I would always see the same red eyes from the closet in the vent above the bathtub, just watching me. Um, it made me extremely uncomfortable, and I spent most of my bath time throwing a wet cloth at the vent. Usually, whenever I hit it, dead on the eyes would disappear until the next time I had a bath, that is. The first apparition. One night, my older brother and I were hanging out, playing games. He asked me to go upstairs to grab him a cup of ice cubes. He liked to eat them. As I was walking up the staircase, I looked up towards the railing that overlooked the downstairs, and standing there, leaning onto the wooden railings, was a figure dressed in a long, heavy-looking hooded robe. Its face was shrouded in blackness, and I couldn't see any defining features. I don't know why, um, but I continued walking up the stairs. But I noticed that as I moved, this entity stopped leaning on the railing and began mimicking my movements in reverse. Every step I took up, it would take one step backward toward the kitchen. When I reached the top of the stairs, the figure had made it to the doorway of our kitchen where it stood. It glanced in my direction and vanished right before my eyes. Days after the murder, he physically reversed my Clara guillotine skill. The second apparition, I saw this figure one more time while I lived at this property. I was upstairs on the computer playing World of Warcraft, which had just recently been released. As I was playing, I started to hear cracking sounds, like someone cracking their knuckles. I thought I was alone in the house at the time, so it struck me as odd. I got up and opened the door to the hallway leading to the same staircase and kitchen area. When I opened the door, the figure was standing at the end of the hall. It wasn't looking at me, though, but I could hear the cracking sound again, realizing that it was coming from this entity. I slammed the door shut and locked it. About 10 seconds after shutting the door, I heard a strange sound that I I can't even describe. It was followed by what sounded like the door being pushed hard, like as if a big gust of wind had hit it. To this day, I have no idea who or what that was, why it was there, or if it was trying to connect with me. I also wonder if this entity might be the same one with the red eyes I had seen previously. Was it getting closer to me? The babysitter. This next part I was unsure about leaving in, but since I'm describing my weird upbringing, I might as well. Um, uh, I'm not sure if this person contributed to the weirdness I experienced, but she definitely pushed my brother and me to seek answers on our own, as you'll see here. My babysitter, I'm going to omit her name, was someone who had connections to our family. Her sister worked on our farm and had her own horses stabled there, so her mother often came along. After a while of her being around, she ended up becoming our sitter. Not long after she started sitting for us, she told us that she was a witch. She showed us really old Polaroid photos of her and two other people performing some kind of ritual with symbols carved into a table they sat at. She also showed us things she could do, like moving objects around without being touched. For a long time, I thought this was just a fun story and tricks, but one day I went inside from playing in the garage and made my way upstairs where she was preparing dinner. She was unaware I was nearby. I witnessed one of our knives on the counter slide about 2 feet across straight into her hands, and she just continued cutting as if nothing abnormal had just happened. But up next is a second knife I contemplated, really close at 6 inches long. It's just the same height as the first. It felt like it went. And you never saw that I noticed, and I never brought it up. But what that sparked in me was curiosity. And because of that, I started researching black magic. After looking around online with my brother, we stumbled onto some websites that gave directions on how to perform black magic rituals, and so we attempted it ourselves. We went outside, drew a pentagram with fallen leaves, placed a statue in the middle, and began to read off the ritual words we had written down. It was at this moment that our sitter looked outside, saw what we were doing, and ran out screaming at us to stop. She started kicking the leaves everywhere and taking the statue we had placed. She scolded us, saying we had no idea what we were playing with and to never do something like that again. Not long after, she stopped sitting for us, and sadly, she passed away not too long after that. While this part wasn't necessarily paranormal, I think the context is needed to understand how my upbringing was and how these events may have created a domino effect for more to come. And only one thing was for sure, my sitter had an interest in the occult. My last experience at this property was more tame, but still creepy. I was getting ready for school in the morning, and as I went to grab the hair comb, it just flicked off the counter and hit the wall behind me. I know it didn't just fall. Note, this brings us to the end of the first house before we move to rural BC near Lone Butte. I would like to note that these experiences so far are just the ones I could easily remember. They don't include the noises I would hear, voices saying my name when nobody was home, shadows of people in my peripherals, and the feelings of being watched or sometimes touched. As I moved along Butte, at this point in my life, we had packed up and moved about 5 hours north to outskirts of Lone Butte, BC. About a 20-minute drive from our place. The property we moved to, sat on, was roughly 100 acres of woodland. We were in the middle of nowhere, and our closest neighbors were a good distance away. Anyway, here are my main experiences at this house. I won't include everything, as there are just too many experiences of footsteps, things moving by themselves around the house, people talking when alone, shadows when nobody was home. You get the point. The closet slamming plus terrible timing. My first major experience at this house was with my brother, who is very skeptical, and my stepsister. We were watching The Grudge at the time, and all of a sudden the upstairs closet started violently slamming open and closed for well over a few minutes. This terrified all of us, and we didn't know what to do, so we just ran outside and waited for our parents to come back home. I did end up going back inside to grab shoes since the gravel was hurting my feet. And I went inside. I poked my head around the corner towards the living room just as the scene in The Grudge played, where it's a close-up of her eyeball rolling from the back of her head to stare at you. I always found the timing to be so perfect. It's almost comical, but at that time, it scared me to death, and I did not want to go back inside at all. The schoolhouse in the woods. So, quick context about the property I wasn't aware of until I moved away years later. The property we lived on in Lone Butte was around 100 acres and was old native land. The property had two barns, one for the horses and one was storage slash workshop. What it wasn't always just a barn for storage. It used to be a old school where the Catholic priest would bring the native children and force them lessons about Christ. This place on the property was burnt down at one point, and my ex and wife at the time spent years with me. And so it even had the old desk and chairs stacked up in the corner of it. There's been rumors I've heard of possible mass graves being tied to places, and that these schoolhouses were not particularly kind towards the native children. Anyways, my experiences with this schoolhouse, along with my brother, is that we've both seen the faces of kids in the glass and lights from the workshop would randomly turn on and off at all hours of the day or night. The woods at this property were just as spooky. We would find old leather belts tied up to trees, pickaxes, machetes, long and deep gouges ripped out of trees, and prints of large animals around the forest. We also found what I think was a junkyard for old vintage cars. Some had been there so long trees were growing through them. The dog man. Night I was in the hot tub on the deck outside, just watching the woods, taking in the silence. It was winter time, and we just recently had a snowfall that left around knee height deep of snow. It was around 2, 3 a.m., and out of nowhere, this very large wolf, bigger than one I've ever seen by far, came out of the woods. I remember its coat being a shimmering silver and its bright, piercing green eyes. As this wolf was walking along the fence of our paddocks, it locked eyes with mine, and we just kind of stared at each other as he walked past me, both alone in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. What happened next till this day instantly makes my spine shiver. As the wolf walked past, he walked towards our barn with our horses in it. It became darker as it entered the barn, but the other side of the barn still had a bright light illuminating the outside that I could see clearly. This wolf, as it entered, halfway through, it went from the shape of a wolf to a very large, broad-shouldered person. The horses didn't make a single sound, and this person that now stood roughly 7 feet tall walked down the rest of the hall and rounded the corner towards the open field, but didn't emerge from the other side. I never saw it again. My brother had his own encounter with this same wolf. I'm guessing he told me that he woke up randomly one night from the feeling of being watched. He then looked out his window to see a very large wolf walking away from his window. So I'm guessing it was watching him sleep.